Now let us talk about coal and petroleum. In chapter number 14, we have learned that coal and petroleum are non renewable sources of energy. In our previous sessions, we have seen some of the issues involved in the conservation and sustainable use of resources like forests, wildlife, and water. These can meet our needs if we were to use them in a sustainable manner. So, throughout this chapter, we have learned that how to use the natural resources in sustainable manner. And now we come to yet another important resource, and that is fossil fuels. And it includes coal and petroleum, which are important sources of energy for us. How are they important to us? Since the industrial revolution, we have been using increasing amount of energy to meet our basic needs and for the manufacture of a large number of goods upon which our lives depend. And how this energy needs can be fulfilled? These energy needs have been largely met by the reserves of coal and petroleum, the storage of coal and petroleum, so that we can use the stored coal and petroleum for our basic needs and for survival of our lives. Now, if we talk about management of these resources, then the management of these energy sources involves slightly different perspective than the other perspective of management that we have studied earlier. Coal and petroleum were formed from the degradation of biomass, which we have studied in our previous standards, right? And how were they formed? Million years ago by degradation of biomass. And hence, these resources that will be exhausted, that will not be there in future, no matter how carefully we use them, because these resources, fossil fuels, coal and petroleum, that are formed million years ago, and that is why once that will be used, that will not be any more fossil fuels last for future generations. And for that reason, we would need to look for alternative source of energy. Students, here I want you to recall all the alternative sources of energy which we have studied in chapter number 14, sources of energy. There are various estimation about how much this energy sources will last if the present rate of usage continues, and it is estimated that our known petroleum resource that will last us for about 40 years. Petroleum resources will last us about 40 years, and the coal resources will last for another 200 years. But looking at other sources of energy is not the only consideration when we look at the consumption of coal and petroleum. We know that coal and petroleum have been formed from biomass. And in addition to carbon, these contain hydrogen, nitrogen, sulfur. So, what are the components of biomass? They contain carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and sulfur also. When this coal and petroleum are burnt, the products are carbon dioxide, water, oxides of nitrogen. Now, that can be nitric oxide, nitrogen oxide, nitrous oxide. Also, they will form oxides of sulfur. Sulfur monoxide, sulfur dioxide, sulfur trioxide. These all are oxides of sulfur. So, these are the products when this coal and petroleum are burnt. If the combustion takes place in insufficient air, that is in insufficient of oxygen, and we know that is called as incomplete combustion, so that time the product will be not carbon dioxide, the product will be carbon monoxide, in which case when there is combustion in insufficient air or oxygen, then there will be carbon monoxide formed. From all these products, the oxides of sulfur, the oxides of nitrogen, and carbon monoxide are poisonous at high concentrations, and carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, which we all know. Another way of looking at coal and petroleum is that they are huge reservoirs of carbon, and if all these carbon is converted to carbon dioxide, then the carbon dioxide's amount in the atmosphere is going to increase. Okay, if all amount of carbon is converted into carbon dioxide, then the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is going to increase, and we know that when the amount of carbon dioxide increases in the atmosphere, it leads to intense global warming. So we need to use these resources with good judgment or sense. So, this is all about coal and petroleum.